All right, so MORPC's Technical Assistance Program. You guys are here this morning to learn a little bit about the 2022 program and application cycle. So we will jump right in, and just for your reference, we are recording this webinar so we can hopefully post it to the website after today for folks who weren't able to join us. All right, so we're going to kick things off with just a brief introduction to the Technical Assistance Program. So for those who aren't familiar with it, we'll just kind of highlight the background of the program purpose, and what we do with technical assistance. We'll talk a little bit about who's eligible to apply for the program and walk through some of the basic requirements. We'll also talk through specific details about the specific activity types that we are offering for 2022. And then we'll walk through the actual application itself and see if you guys have any questions about that. So quick introduction to the program. The Technical Assistance Program is really here for local governments within our MPO area to ask MORPC for assistance. We know that there are a number of projects and initiatives that our local agencies would love to tackle, but may not have the time or resources to get to. So we are here to assist with those. The program this year is going to take a little bit of a different focus than what it has in the past. We'll be looking to provide services that help us to advance the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or the MTP. So we'll talk about some specific strategies within the MTP that we're hoping to address through the 2022 Technical Assistance Program. We award technical assistance through a competitive application process. So that means communities have to apply for technical assistance, and then we have an evaluation committee that evaluates all of the applications that are received. And we'll talk a little bit about that later this morning as well. And then for this year, we are also hoping to streamline the program a little bit. In the past, the technical assistance services have taken 1.5 to 2 years to complete, but we're hoping to complete these activities a little bit quicker so that we can provide more assistance to more communities going forward. So I mentioned that the 2022 program is going to take a little bit more focus on implementing the MTP. So there are a series of strategies identified within the MTP that really are there to help guide the region toward addressing the larger regional goals that are established as part of the MTP. And for the technical assistance program specifically, we wanted to focus more on the active transportation and transit related strategies. So there are a specific set of strategies that we've identified from the MTP that are included in the technical assistance program guide that's available on our website. But we've also listed them all here in this. Looks like I got muted there. So they are listed in the. Someone playing around with the mute settings. Right, I think I'm good. So the strategies shown here, there are a few specific ones, even within the active transportation and transit strategies, that sort of inspired some of the predetermined technical assistance activities that we have identified for the 2022 program. So you can see some of those highlighted here. We're really looking to help local agencies start to identify and implement high comfort bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We really want to start moving forward the implementation of our Central Ohio Greenways vision. We've also just adopted an update to the Regional Active Transportation Plan, so we'll be looking to move that toward implementation as well. And then as far as just sort of general strategies within the MTP, we also like to encourage, through the technical assistance program, collaboration across communities with stakeholders, as well as equity considerations within the community. So I mentioned that the 2022 program is going to focus a little bit more on implementation, specifically for the MTP, but also for some of these other regional plans that we've developed with stakeholder assistance. So we have the Active Transportation Plan that was just recently adopted, as well as the MORPC Complete Streets Policy. And we also have the Central Ohio Greenways vision that we're looking to implement. So those four regional plans are kind of the primary guidance for the types of technical assistance that we're looking to provide with the 2022 program. And then as far as program eligibility goes, the technical assistance program is, the funding for this program keeps us focused within the MPO area. We do have the ability through other funding sources to provide similar services to communities outside of the MPO, but for this program and for this application in particular, we're looking at communities within the MPO area. So that's shown here on the map. The services that are requested as part of this program must be within the scope of the program. So I mentioned we're looking to implement strategies from those four regional plans. And there are specific activity types that we've identified and we'll discuss a little bit later. We also require that communities submit applications, and those applications must be complete and submitted prior to the deadline. So we'll talk about that later as well. But the application requires a couple of additional documents that must be submitted, including a detailed scope of work. So we expect community applicants to provide details on what specifically they're expecting from the technical assistance, what they anticipate being responsible for themselves, and also to identify a potential schedule for the assistance to be completed within. And we'll talk about those two documents a little bit later as well. The last bit about requirements is related to responsibilities that we expect all applicants to abide by. So we would like for applicants to designate a specific staff person from their local agency to be the project manager. So that means we expect someone to be our point of contact to stay in regular communication throughout the assistance, and we'll expect to have regularly scheduled check-ins with that person. Usually that ends up being, an hour-long bi-weekly meeting just to check in on the status of things, review materials. So we use that to ensure that the project stays on time. We also expect local agencies to communicate internally about the technical assistance. We want to make sure that all of the departments within an agency have some idea of what's going on, have some input into the process, so that there's communication from that perspective, as well as externally. So we expect the local applicant to identify specific stakeholders within the community who are relevant to the technical assistance activity, and to regularly communicate with those folks as well. So before I jump into the specific types of technical assistance, are there any questions about the program itself or the eligibility requirements or any of the information that I just covered? And you can type into the chat or feel free to unmute and ask your question. All right, thanks, Erin. So we'll go into the specific technical assistance services that we've identified for 2022. So we have 6 predetermined activity types that we hope will address needs within your communities. However, if a community is in need of assistance that isn't addressed by these specific activities, we do have an option for an applicant to create their own scope of work. So we'll talk about each of these in detail, but as I go through, again, feel free to type questions into the chat or unmute. So the first activity type that we identified is related to the Central Ohio Greenway's vision. This is a activity that we're hoping to use to assist local agencies with reviewing the current Central Ohio Greenway's vision map, which shows both existing and proposed regional trails of significance. So you can see the shot on the screen here is over on the east side near Gahanna and Jefferson Township. The blue dashed lines are proposed regional trails of significance within the COG vision. And this particular example, we worked with Jefferson Township last year as part of our previous technical assistance round and identified with their assistance a new alignment for an east-west connection for the COG vision. So this kind of inspired this particular activity type. We realized that a number of especially smaller jurisdictions within the MPO area haven't spent a lot of time either reviewing the COG vision or communicating with the COG board about what their local priorities are. So we really want to understand the specific community needs as it relates to Central Ohio Greenway's trails, connections to those trails, appropriate alignments within the community for those trails. And the end goal for this activity type would be to refine what's in the current COG vision based on those local community needs, but then also to develop a strategy for how that particular community might move forward in terms of obtaining funding and then implementing those new proposed routes. The second activity type that we have identified also relates to Central Ohio Greenways, but includes a little bit of our active transportation plan as well. So this is looking at access to trails. You know, how are community residents and visitors actually getting to the regional trail system? In a lot of cases, the access points to the trail system are along roadways that may or may not have appropriate bike facilities or even pedestrian facilities for people to walk and bike to the trails. So this project or activity type will specifically look at trails within a particular jurisdiction, identify the access points, what the access to those access points looks like. The active transportation plan that we just adopted includes an analysis of the arterial and collector roadway network in terms of level of traffic stress for bicyclists. So that would be one potential way to evaluate this trail accessibility, looking at the types of facilities that connect to those access points and identifying where improvements might be needed in order to provide better access to the trails. So again, the end goal for this activity type would include identifying those potential improvements and then developing a strategy for obtaining funding and implementing those improvements. The third activity type that we'll be offering is related to active transportation in general. So this assistance would look again within a specific jurisdiction to better understand a community's needs in terms of active transportation. And this can go sort of one of two ways. We have a number of bike and ped projects that are already identified within the MTP. So if a community wants to spend some time to further review what's already in the MTP and maybe refine some of those projects, remove some, add some new ones, that's something that we can look at as part of this activity. Or we could simply work with the local agency to identify needs within the community and establish some active transportation projects to prioritize within that jurisdiction. So again, goal for the deliverables on this one would be to identify those needs within a particular community and then work to develop a strategy to obtain funding to implement those. And one of those strategies would be to get those projects into the MTP. I think the next update to the MTP will kick off in earnest next year. So this is really good timing to get some new projects into the MTP to get them eligible for federal transportation dollars. The next activity type is a little bit more traditional for us. So the past couple of technical assistance rounds, we have offered assistance with developing complete streets policies. So this is one we've had a lot of success with in the past. We've worked with the City of Delaware and the City of Worthington to develop complete streets policies that have since been adopted in both communities. And this is also a goal within the MTP. We, I think, established an objective or a target within the MTP to have all communities within the MPO area adopting a complete streets policy by the year 2050. So we will continue to provide this assistance to help local agencies develop their own policies. The next activity type is a little bit more focused on pedestrian safety. We know that pedestrian safety is a big challenge for our region, particularly so in the last couple of years. We've seen pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries really increase. So we wanted to make sure to focus at least some assistance in this area. So this particular activity type, we will work with a specific jurisdiction to conduct a pedestrian-focused safety study. So we'll work with the community to analyze all of the pedestrian-involved crashes that have occurred, identify kind of priority locations for further study, and then conduct a physical walk audit to better understand the conditions that may be contributing to pedestrian safety issues. And this project or activity type will also focus on implementation. So the goal for deliverables here would be to identify potential safety improvements that can be made and then develop a strategy for how to obtain funding and implement those improvements. And then our final predetermined activity type is focused around transit. So this is a little bit more reminiscent of our past technical assistance that focus more on the principles of Insight 2050 and how development can really support the development of future transit facilities. So for this assistance type, we will work with a community to get a better understanding of local policies and standards that impact the way development occurs within the community, so that we can identify some relevant best practices or other things to potentially change within the community so that future development can be a little bit more transit supportive. And then I mentioned we will be providing an option for communities to develop their own scope of work. So there are a few requirements associated with this. We're still hoping to continue that focus on moving some of those regional plans further toward implementation. So we really would like any projects that are proposed to align with either the MTP, the ATP, or that COG vision map. And the main requirement here is that the applicant must provide a detailed scope of work with the application that specifies exactly what is expected out of the assistance, what they are requesting from MORPC specifically, but also what parts of the activity the local agency would be responsible for, include an estimated schedule for the technical assistance. And are there any questions about the activity types for 2022? Did the predetermined activity types hit any specific needs for your communities? Do those address things that you guys are looking to do? Well, hopefully so. Okay, so now we will get into the application itself. So this year, we are actually offering an online application. So the link to the program application is now on our website, and it's available through FormStack. So it's a fairly simple application. I think every year we've opened up the technical assistance application, we have tried to refine it and simplify it as much as possible. So it's only 4 pages. The questions that are in the application are included in the technical assistance program guide. So there's plenty of information in there about the application if you have not read it yet, but that is also available on our website. So as far as the online application goes, there are a couple of things to note here. You can see a screenshot of the opening page that the link will drop you on. It just includes some information and instructions for filling out the application. So FormStack does allow for saving your progress. If you're not able to complete the application in one sitting, you can save it and return later to finish it. The only thing to note with that is you will not be able to upload any attachments until you're ready to submit the final application. It will not save any attachments if you attach them and try to come back to the application later. And then all fields within the application are required, so you'll have to fill in all the blanks before it will let you submit the application. So once you read through the instructions, you click the start button at the bottom of the page, and that will take you to page 1 of the application. So the first 2 pages are just kind of general required information. So you see here, the first page is just your contact information. So this is where we'd ask that you identify the designated project manager. So this will be the person who we communicate with throughout the process of the technical assistance activity. And then you can see down at the bottom of the screen here, there will be a link at the bottom of each page that allows you to save your current progress, and it will provide a link for you to return back to the application later if you're not able to complete it. So once you fill in your project manager's contact information, you'll hit the next button and it will take you to the second page, which again is just more of the required documentation. So this is where we ask you to specify which particular activity type you are applying for. So there's a little button that will take you to a drop-down list of the 6 predetermined activity types, but also the option to select other projects where you can specify your own scope of work. So you'll have that option to select here as well. And then for the preferred scope of work, this is just a reminder here that you'll be required to submit an actual document identifying the scope of work for that selected activity type. But you won't be able to upload that document until the final page of the application. So there's nothing to do here, it's just a reminder. And then the final piece here is staff commitment. So this is where we ask for you to kind of estimate how much time you anticipate local agency staff committing to the technical assistance activity. So this is going to be based on that scope of work document and the overall schedule that you estimate for the scope of work. This could be how many hours a week your staff intend to spend on the project, hours per month or hours total. It's just kind of a general estimate to show that you do anticipate committing actual staff time to work with MORPC staff on the activity. And then again, you've got the save and resume link at the bottom of the page, as well as a next and previous button, so you can go back to the previous page if you need to edit any previous content, or you can continue to the next page. So this third page includes 6 questions that determine how each application will actually be evaluated. And we'll talk about that in more detail here in a minute. So these 6 questions are open-ended responses that do have a character limit, but should allow for, I think, about 500 words or so. So it's plenty of space for you to answer the question, but we do appreciate succinct responses. So you'll notice there's a little number in the bottom right corner of each of the text boxes, so that will let you know how much space you have remaining as you type your responses. And then the final page of the application is where you'll upload those required attachments that we mentioned and submit your final application. So on this page, you'll notice some instructions here about the required documentation. So we've talked about the scope of work already, but another required piece of documentation is a signed letter of commitment. So we talk about this in the program guide, but basically this is in place of, in the past we had required a resolution signed by either your city council or board of trustees acknowledging that the community is undertaking a project with MORPC technical assistance. But that we felt was a little bit too cumbersome for a lot of communities, so we've simplified that and just requested a letter of commitment from the local agency. And I'll give a quick example of that here in a minute. But you can find an example that you could use. We've provided a link to that on our website as well as within the application itself. So there's a template you can use. And then there are 2 separate upload buttons, one for your scope of work document and one for the signed letter of commitment. So just a reminder here, you cannot attach these documents until you're ready to submit the application. So once you've completed all the previous pages and attached those two documents, you'll be able to click the submit button. And then here, just a couple of quick notes on those two required attachments. So if you have reviewed the Technical Assistance Program Guide before today, you may remember seeing some detailed descriptions of each of our predetermined activity types. So the program guide does include a very brief outline of a potential scope of work for those 6 activity types that we discussed. So that is a potential starting place for you to create your detailed scope of work to submit as part of the application. But we do expect a little bit more detail in that submittal. So we want to know specifically what your community needs for this activity. You can tweak what's already written in the Technical Assistance Program Guide, but we'd also like to know how you identify responsibilities. So which specific tasks would you like MORPC assistance with versus which tasks can be done by local agency staff. You'll need to also spell out the specific deliverables that you anticipate coming out of the activity type. And then again, include an estimated schedule for when you'd like to see each phase of the scope completed. And then as part of the, once a project is awarded technical assistance, MORPC staff will work with the designated project manager to review those scopes in detail and finalize those before kicking off project work. And then this is just a screenshot of the sample letter of commitment that we provided in the application. So this is a document, a Word document that you can use. You can tweak however needed, or you can come up with your own to submit as part of the application. Okay, any questions about the application itself? It should hopefully be pretty simple. All right, so then the next section here, we'll talk about how the applications are evaluated. So we mentioned the 6 questions that make up the application criteria, and those will be scored by an evaluation committee to help us identify which technical assistance activities to award for 2022. So we'll go through each of those in more detail here. So the first one is community objectives. This is where we ask you to tell us why the particular activity that you've selected is important for your community and how assistance from MORPC will benefit that effort. So if your community has other planning documents excuse me, referencing the need for this type of study or for this type of activity, that can be noted here. Scoring for this particular criteria will be based on how clearly the community objectives are described, how much they align with the MTP, the ATP, or the COG vision, and whether or not the technical assistance from MORPC will actually benefit the effort. For the MTP strategies question, this is where we want to hear from you about the specific MTP strategies that you hope to address through this particular technical assistance. So this should include your vision for how completion of that selected activity will result in implementation of the strategies that you list from the MTP. So scoring for this particular criteria will depend on how clearly a connection is made between that selected activity type and advancement of the identified MTP strategies. So the next question is about implementing regional priorities. So this is the applicant's opportunity to indicate how they see the selected technical assistance activity advancing the regional plans that we've talked about toward implementation. So as I mentioned earlier, the goal for this round of technical assistance is really to move those regional plans forward. So scoring for this criteria will be based on how clearly the applicant responses demonstrate that connection. And then the next question focuses on equity considerations. So here we would like the applicant to identify specific populations within the community who are currently underserved and may benefit from the selected technical assistance. Scoring for this criteria will depend on the identification of those specific population groups, but also how clearly the response demonstrates the potential benefits of this activity to those population groups. And then the final two questions. So we've got local commitment and collaboration. This is where we want to know how much the larger community will be engaged in the technical assistance effort. While it may not be necessary to conduct actual public engagement through these efforts, we do expect key stakeholders to be involved. We talked a little bit about this earlier in the responsibilities, but scoring for this criteria will be based on identification of those potential stakeholders, how they might be engaged through the process, and what opportunities that stakeholder engagement could bring to the technical assistance effort. And then the final question is about leveraging investment. So this is where we want to know what the applicant's plans are for what comes next. Once we complete the technical assistance, what does the community hope to do with those results? So scoring for this particular criteria will depend on how well the applicant demonstrates a vision for what that successful implementation looks like. Any questions about the scoring criteria? And again, all this information is in the technical assistance program guide that's available on the website. Okay, so the last piece of information we have for you guys today is the timeline. So today is December 13th. We are here with you for the informational webinar about the technical assistance program. We have also opened the call for applications, so you should be able to access the link to the form stack application on our technical assistance program page. And the deadline to submit those applications is about a month out, so January 14th. By the end of the day, we expect those applications to be completed and submitted by then. And our hope is to turn around evaluation of those applications by the beginning of February, so that we can kick off technical assistance by March with the hopes of completing all of the assistance before the end of 2022. And that is all the information that we have for you today. So are there any questions about any of this information? I know it's a lot. If nothing comes to mind immediately, you're welcome to reach out to me at any time to ask questions or discuss a potential application. I'm happy to chat offline as well. All right. Nick or Maria, do you have any final closing notes you want to make for the group?
The only thing I would say would just be to reiterate what you said, Lauren, about we're welcome to submit any questions or follow up with Lauren afterwards to any help we can provide in filling out the applications and respond to any questions you have. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Nick. All right. Well, if there are no questions, that will end the webinar for us today. So again, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week, and we hope to see some applications coming soon. Thank you guys so much for joining us.